My name is Ben Haack. I'm an athlete from Australia. I've been involved in Special Olympics for 20 years. I've been an athlete leader for 10 years and have still serve on my national board. I'm still involved with Asia Pacific, with their advisory committee, and am also on the Special Olympics International Board since 2014. Also involved in the Organisational Excellence Department of Special Olympics International.
That's amazing. I'm curious if you can talk through what employment looks like for people with intellectual disabilities.
I mean, it can vary quite a lot when you look at it from say, a global perspective. There are probably quite a lot of parts of the world where there really aren't any opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities. In saying that, there are probably a lot more opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities than there used to be.
Mm-hmm.
The differences, though, are that for people with intellectual disabilities, the job, in terms of the scope and capacity for you to progress or achieve, is quite often very limited. Most people with disabilities get a job and they very rarely progress. They very rarely get to a higher level. They basically stay in the same job. I mean, you hear so many stories of that around the world. You know, like they start off at Walmart pushing trolleys, and 30 years later, they're pushing trolleys. So it is a progression, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in those sort of conversations. As I've quite often said, for example, if people were, if people like me, for example, were women, there would be massive issues with this in the media, and people would not be happy about it, and it would be considered discriminatory. Yet, quite often, this sort of thing is seen as celebrated. So, for me, it's that sort of change in conversation that needs to start to happen a lot more. But yeah, to answer it, there is undoubtedly some things that really do need to change.
I know you mentioned and I know this, you work for Special Olympics International, and you've been kind of instrumental in being a voice for athletes and people with disabilities, and kind of leading the way for helping both this unified movement that you talked about and also with inclusion in the workforce as well. Just curious, what does having a job like that and having the resources to be able to have this kind of job that maybe someone with a disability 40, 50 years ago, even 10 years ago, wouldn't have had this opportunity? How does that feel to you?
Oh, yeah, it feels amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, it feels amazing. I mean, there's probably never really been there hasn't been a time before this where people like me are in those sort of positions in any organisation to offer a voice. So it is truly an amazing sort of feeling and a great thing to happen. Undoubtedly, there's no doubt about that, and I do feel very lucky about that. But then I also sometimes feel slightly a little bit guilty about that, because there could be so much more of that out there. We just got to find a way to change the landscape to ensure that that can happen. So it's kind of a two-way thing for me.
That really just speaks to who you are and the work you're doing, that you see, yeah, it's amazing that I had this opportunity, but I'm fighting for and thinking about other people in this community who don't have this opportunity and want to help include them. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question for you. So as I told you about, for the Accenture, we're kind of hosting, in our disability group, we're hosting a session, and we call them lunch and learns, about what this whole spread the word inclusion movement is. We shared a little bit about it before, but from your perspective, what is this movement and what does it mean to you as a Special Olympics athlete to be a part of this movement?
it's interesting. I mean, it started off as one Pacific word, and now it's focused more around an idea, which is inclusion. And I think what we're really trying to do is to get people to think about not only their words or their terminology, because I think sometimes there's too much of a focus on that, but also on their actions and their behaviours and their own individual responsibility as a person to try and seek to do better. And I think that's really an important thing to help people focus on.
I love that. And you mentioned inclusion, and I mentioned it in a few of my questions as well. But just for anyone who might not be familiar with what that term means, I know I didn't send you this question, so feel free if I'm putting you on the spot. We can skip it. But if you feel open to it, what does inclusion mean to you for anyone who isn't familiar with this term?
I don't think it's ever one solution or one perspective or one idea. I think it's, you look at probably, racism, ethnicity, gender, feminism, probably a lot of those sort of movements are all, in a way, trying to be a part of trying to create inclusion. So for me, that's what I think it is. And I think it's probably just quite really simple, really, is that we all want to be included and accepted. And I think that's something that sometimes isn't always made that clear, particularly with all the various conversations. And it's really about understanding and accepting difference, which, can be challenging, but it is something about that.
And yeah, I mean, that's kind of my take on it.